War smelled like burnt metal and fear. The battlefield stretched across the scarred plains of Tryon 7, once a green world, now a wasteland of craters, smoking wreckage and broken dreams. It was here that humanity, outnumbered and outgunned, made its final stand against the Cleari Dominion. And it was here that Zane Holt, a 27-year-old engineer turned reluctant soldier, stood trembling in his boots. Literally trembling. Are all humans like this? A soft, melodic voice asked behind him. Zane turned to see her, Queen Elira of the Cleari, watching him with a curious tilt of her head. Even in the chaos of war, she was breathtaking. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the dusty light, her eyes deep violet and ancient. She wore no helmet, no heavy armor, only ceremonial battle robes and a crown that glowed like starlight. And she was smiling at him, teasing him. Like what? He managed to ask, trying to hide the way his hands shook as he loaded his plasma rifle. So fragile, so terrified, she said lightly, stepping closer, and yet still standing. He forced a shaky grin. Standing, about all I'm good at. Running usually ends with me falling on my face. Elira's smile deepened. Humans, always joking, even when death breathes down their neck. Helps keep the panic from showing, Zane said. Mostly. They had met 3 months earlier, under very different circumstances. Zane had been part of a diplomatic repair team sent to broker peace. She had been the queen trying to stop a war. But peace talks had failed. No one knew who fired the first shot. Now both sides were at war, and Elira, once his uneasy ally, was now something else. A commander, a leader, a beacon he couldn't stop following, even into hell itself. Stay close, she said, pulling him from his thoughts as artillery roared in the distance. The next wave will be heavy. Define heavy, Zane muttered. Dozens of assault mechs, air support, possibly orbital bombardment. Right, he sighed, so heavy. She laughed softly, an unexpected sound amid the screams and gunfire. You are either the bravest or most foolish human I've met. Why not both? The battle began with fire. The Cleari war machines descended like thunder, massive and relentless. Plasma streaked through the sky. The ground shook beneath the march of mech legs. Soldiers screamed orders over comms as trenches lit up with explosions. And Zane was shaking. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't trained for this. He had fixed engines, built ships, and once soldered a coffee machine back to life in college. Now he was in a trench, trying not to vomit while death screamed overhead. Zane, Elira shouted over the chaos, stay with me. I'm trying, he yelled back, fumbling to aim his rifle. His first shot went wide. His second barely grazed an enemy shield. He was useless, and every mistake cost lives. A blast hit the ground near him, throwing him off his feet. He coughed, dirt filling his lungs, his ears ringing. When he looked up, a towering mech loomed over the trench, weapon charging for a killing blow. Elira leapt between them. Move, she shouted, her staff slicing through the air. A beam of violet energy slammed into the mech's chest, staggering it back. I said move. Zane scrambled to his feet and dove behind cover. The blast missed him by inches, melting the earth where he had stood. Thanks, he gasped. She shot him a glare over her shoulder. You are terrible at following orders. Never said I was good at this soldier thing. Hours passed. The fighting didn't stop. Zane lost track of time, of everything except the sound of his heart pounding and the sight of Elira, still fighting, still leading. She was everywhere at once, cutting down attackers, shielding soldiers, rallying troops with a single word. And yet somehow she always circled back to him. Always checking. Always watching. Even when he failed, even when he missed, even when he stumbled and had to crawl just to stay alive. And then something strange happened. His hands stopped shaking. The mech units pushed forward and Zane found himself separated from the others, pinned behind a half-destroyed barrier. He was alone, out of ammo and terrified. "This is it," he muttered. "This is how I die, like a moron hiding behind a wall." But then he heard voices, human voices, calling for help deeper in the trench. A squad had been cut off. If they didn't get support, they'd be slaughtered. He looked back the way he'd come. Safety, retreat, survival. Then he looked toward the voices. "Damn it," he muttered, grabbing a discarded rifle and charging toward the danger. The trench was chaos. 3 soldiers were cornered, their shields failing. Zane dove into the fray, firing wildly, drawing enemy fire onto himself. He didn't think. He just moved, ducking, shouting, throwing grenades he barely knew how to use. "Go," he yelled. "Get out of here." "Who are you?" one soldier shouted. "Maintenance crew," Zane grunted. "Long story." The last mech unit turned toward him, weapons glowing, and then it exploded in a burst of violet light. Elira landed beside him, staff humming with energy. "Are you insane?" she demanded. "Apparently," he said, out of breath. "But hey, they're alive." She stared at him, not with anger, not with disapproval, but something deeper, something raw. And then, for the first time in the long, bloody war, the Queen of the Cleari smiled with something like pride. "He doesn't give up," she whispered. The battle raged until sunrise. Humanity held the line, barely. They were battered and broken, but they were not defeated. Zane sat on the edge of the trench, staring at the smoking horizon. His uniform was torn. His body ached. His hands still trembled, but now it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, determination, life. Elira approached quietly and sat beside him. "You could have died today." "Yeah," he said softly, "but I didn't." "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything?" He shrugged. "Because someone had to, and I was there." She was silent for a moment, then said, "You are not like other humans." "Good weird or bad weird?" "Good," she said, smiling faintly. "Very good." The war was far from over. They both knew that. More battles lay ahead, more blood, more heartbreak. But something had changed on that field, something small and fragile, yet stronger than any weapon. A queen had seen something in a trembling human. And that human had found something worth fighting for. The morning after the battle, the sky above Tryon 7 was soft and golden, a strange, beautiful lie after such a bloody night. Smoke still curled from the craters, and broken war machines littered the plains, but there was a hush in the air, a hush that felt like hope. Zane sat alone on a broken wall, his armor scuffed and his hands still bandaged. Every muscle in his body ached. Every memory of the fight replayed behind his eyes, the noise, the fear, the moment he chose to run toward danger instead of away from it. He had survived somehow. Thinking of running away. The voice made him jump. He turned to see Queen Elira walking toward him, her robe swept by the wind, her silver hair glinting beneath the rising sun. She looked as regal and composed as ever, except for the tiny smirk tugging at her lips. "Running?" Zane asked. "After last night, no way. I'm staying until I've officially embarrassed myself in every trench on this planet." She laughed, really laughed, and the sound made his heart skip. "Embarrassed? You saved a squad and distracted a mech with nothing but courage and bad aim." "Emphasis on the bad aim," he said, smiling despite himself. "I nearly shot my own foot." "And yet," she said softly, stepping closer, "you did not give up." The way she said it with warmth and pride made his chest tighten. "You keep saying that." "Because it is rare," she replied, "even among my people." They walked the battlefield together, inspecting the damage. Cleari's soldiers bowed as their queen passed, while the human troops saluted Zane awkwardly, clearly unsure how to treat the trembling engineer who had somehow become a hero. Zane tried not to notice. He still felt like an imposter. "You don't have to keep thanking me," he said after a while. "I was just scared and stupid." "Courage is not the absence of fear," Elira replied. It is doing what is right despite it. He glanced at her. You sound like a war poster. And you sound like someone who still does not believe in himself, she countered gently. He sighed. Can you blame me? I'm not a soldier, Elira. I fix engines. I make coffee machines work again. People like me don't win wars. She stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Then perhaps wars should not need to be won by people like me. Perhaps they should be saved by people like you. The words sank deep, deeper than he wanted them to. He didn't know how to answer, so he just looked away, cheeks warm. That afternoon, they returned to the command tent for a strategy meeting. The next battle loomed, the Dominion's largest assault yet, a push that could end the war for good or doom humanity's chances forever. Our intelligence reports suggest a strike at dusk, said Commander Lyron, the Cleari military chief. They will hit Sector 3, it's our weakest line. We don't have enough troops there, another officer argued. We'll be overrun. Then we strengthen it, Elira said. We move reinforcements from the southern flank and fortify the trenches. That leaves the south exposed, Lyron replied, if they flank us. They won't, Zane interrupted. The room went silent, all eyes turned to him. Explain, Elira said, curiosity glinting in her eyes. Zane swallowed. They're expecting a traditional response, more troops, more guns. But what if we do something different? We can't beat them with numbers, but we can outsmart them. If we make Sector 3 look weak while secretly setting up traps and remote turrets, they'll walk right into a kill zone. The room murmured. It was bold, risky, but it might work. Elira smiled. Make it happen. Wait, he said, startled. I was just suggesting it. I'm not a strategist. You are now, she replied, her voice firm. We trust you. He stared at her, at the unwavering confidence in her eyes, and felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. Maybe he could be more than just an engineer. That night under a deep violet sky, Zane and Elira oversaw preparations together. They crawled through muddy trenches, adjusted energy traps, and rewired old defense turrets. She moved with grace and precision, but she listened when he spoke, asked questions when he explained, and laughed when he made clumsy mistakes. You're smiling, he teased as they worked side by side. I am always smiling, she replied. No, this is different, he said. This is the real smile, the one you use when you're not being a queen. She paused, then met his gaze. You notice too much, Zane Holt. Maybe, he said softly, but I like noticing you. She looked away quickly, but he didn't miss the faint shimmer of blue on her cheeks, the Cleari equivalent of a blush. As dusk approached, so did the enemy. The ground trembled beneath the march of thousands. Warships roared overhead. A wall of mechs and soldiers advanced across the plains, confident and unstoppable. Zane's hands shook again. Of course they did, but this time he didn't let fear control him. Ready? Elira asked, standing beside him on the command ridge. No, he admitted honestly, but I'm here. She smiled, soft and proud. That is enough. The enemy charged, and the traps exploded. Turrets hidden beneath wreckage sprang to life, shredding the first wave. Mines detonated in dazzling arcs of light. The Dominion's mighty formation broke into chaos, stumbling into the clever ambush Zane had designed. The plan worked. It's working, he breathed. You are working, Elira corrected. You did this. Hours later, as the enemy retreated and the battlefield fell silent, Zane found himself back on that same broken wall. This time, he wasn't shaking. This time, soldiers clapped his back, calling him commander and hero. And this time, Elira stood beside him, not as a distant queen, but as something closer, something that made his heart beat faster. You proved them wrong, she said softly. You proved yourself wrong. He smiled. I guess I did. Do you believe me now? She asked. Believe what? That you are more than you think. Zane hesitated, then looked into her violet eyes and nodded. "I'm starting to." They stood there in silence, the stars rising above them, two unlikely allies, drawn together by war and something deeper neither dared name. For the first time, Zane wasn't just surviving. He was becoming. The victory at Sector 3 changed everything. Human morale soared. Cleari's soldiers, once doubtful of their strange human ally, now saluted Zane with respect. Even the most stubborn generals spoke his name with admiration. But none of it mattered as much as the way Elira looked at him now, not just as an engineer or a soldier, but as someone she trusted. "Do you know," she said one evening as they walked the perimeter together, "some in my council now call you the Starborn Strategist." Zane snorted. "That sounds way too cool for me. I still spill coffee on myself half the time." She smiled, that rare, soft smile she saved only for him. "Humility suits you." "I'm not humble," he replied, "just realistic." "Then perhaps your reality is too small." They walked in silence for a moment, their boots crunching over scorched ground, the stars glittering faintly above the battlefield. The night was strangely peaceful, too peaceful, and deep down they both knew why. The enemy wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next morning the alarms confirmed it. A scout ship brought word of a massive Dominion fleet massing in orbit, the largest assault yet. If they broke through this line, the war would be lost. "The enemy's flagship is leading the charge," Commander Lyran reported. "The Vraxis. It carries their commander and their orbital strike cannons. If it reaches firing position, the planet will fall." "Then we must destroy it before it enters range," Elira said firmly. Lyran hesitated. "That would require a strike team, deep infiltration. We'd need someone who can sabotage the ship from the inside." All eyes turned to Zane. "Oh no," he said immediately. "Nope, I know that look. That's the send the human to do something stupid and heroic look." "You're the only one who understands both human and Dominion tech," Elira reminded him gently. "You're the only one who could pull it off." "I'm also the only one here who's terrified of dying in space," he muttered. She stepped closer, her eyes locking with his. "Zane, you've done the impossible before. I believe in you." He sighed. "That's cheating." "What is?" "Looking at me like that, it's not fair." Her lips curved into a mischievous smile. "Is it working?" "Unfortunately," he grumbled. "All right, I'll do it, but if I die, I'm haunting you." The plan was simple, at least on paper. Zane, Elira, and a small team would board a stealth shuttle, slip past enemy defenses, infiltrate the Vraxis, and sabotage its main reactor. If they succeeded, the flagship would be crippled before it could fire. If they failed, well, there wouldn't be enough left of them to worry about it. "Last chance to back out," Elira said as they suited up in the hangar. "Last chance to come up with a better idea," Zane replied. She laughed softly. "It is far too late for that." The shuttle launched silently into the void, slipping through the Dominion fleet's detection grid like a shadow. Zane stared out the viewport as the colossal shape of the Vraxis came into view, a floating fortress bristling with cannons and glowing with deadly power. "Remind me again why I agreed to this," he asked. "Because you are brave," Elira said. "I'm definitely not." "Because you care." "Okay, that one's fair." They docked on a maintenance bay and slipped inside, moving through the ship's dark corridors. Zane's heart pounded with every step. He wasn't built for this, sneaking around an enemy warship with a plasma pistol, and a backpack full of explosives was not part of his engineering degree. "Left here," he whispered, reading the schematics on his datapad. "Reactors 4 decks down." They descended quietly, evading patrols and hacking security doors. Twice, they came within seconds of discovery. Once, a guard nearly spotted them before Elira dropped him with a silent, stun blast. "You're enjoying this," Zane muttered. "Perhaps a little," she admitted. "You're terrifying." And yet you keep following me. Yeah, he said softly, I guess I do. At last they reached the reactor chamber, a vast, pulsing heart of energy at the center of the ship. Zane's hands trembled as he unpacked the sabotage device. This was it. One mistake and they were vaporized. Almost there, he murmured, connecting the final circuits. Just need 2 more minutes. But fate had other plans. Intruders, a voice roared. Alarms blared, doors slammed shut. Armed Dominion soldiers poured into the chamber, weapons raised. Zane, Elira shouted, finish it, I'll hold them off. What? He yelled, ducking behind a console. There's too many of them. Trust me. She charged forward, a blur of silver and light, cutting through the enemy with impossible grace. But there were dozens, and more kept coming. Zane's fingers flew over the controls, every nerve screaming at him to run. Come on, he muttered. Almost done. The device beeped. Sabotage complete, the system announced. Time to go, he shouted. Go, Elira ordered. I will cover you. No way I'm leaving you, he yelled back. Zane. Not a chance. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit. We do this together, remember. For a second she stared at him, stunned, speechless, then nodded. Together, they sprinted through the corridors as explosions rocked the ship around them. They barely made it to the shuttle. The Vraxis was already tearing itself apart behind them, flames and debris lighting up the void as they blasted away. Status, Lyran's voice crackled over comms. Target neutralized, Elira replied. We're coming home. Zane slumped back in his seat, shaking from adrenaline. We actually did it. Yes, Elira said softly, sitting beside him. We did. For a long moment, they sat in silence, staring at the stars. Then Elira reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his gently. You were supposed to run, she whispered, but you didn't. Yeah, well, he said, smiling tiredly. I don't give up. Her eyes sparkled. No, you never do. When they landed, the battlefield below was already shifting. With their flagship gone, the Dominion fleet retreated. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. And as Zane stepped off the shuttle, exhausted and alive, he realized something else had changed too, something deeper. He wasn't just a trembling engineer anymore. He was part of something bigger. And beside him, smiling in the starlight, was a queen who saw more in him than he had ever seen in himself. The days after the Vraxis mission passed in a blur of celebrations and long overdue rest. Humanity and the Clari Dominion had achieved their first real victory together. Songs were sung. Medals were awarded. Soldiers spoke Zane's name with admiration, and his story, the trembling engineer who defied the impossible, spread across every outpost and ship. But for Zane, none of it mattered as much as the moments he shared with Elira. It started with small things, walking side by side after strategy meetings, late-night conversations over rations and tea, and the way their hands would almost touch when they stood too close. It felt like something fragile and growing, a secret neither dared to name. And yet it was undeniable. One quiet evening, Zane found himself on the palace balcony overlooking the glowing spires of Trion's capital. The stars shimmered above like scattered diamonds, and the cool wind carried the faint scent of the alien gardens below. He was lost in thought when a familiar voice broke the silence. Humans always look at the stars as if they're searching for something, Elira said, stepping beside him. Maybe we are, he replied. We're small compared to all that, makes us wonder where we belong. And do you know, she asked softly. He shrugged. Not yet, but I'm starting to think maybe I belong here. Her lips curved in a faint smile. Here, among my people. No, he said, turning to face her. Here beside you. Elira's breath caught. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them seemed to hum, delicate and electric. You speak as if you mean it, she whispered. I do, he said, and that scares the hell out of me." They sat together on the edge of the balcony, the city lights painting their faces gold and silver. Elira's crown glimmered softly in the moonlight, and for the first time, Zane realized how tired she looked, not physically, but deep down, in the way her shoulders carried the weight of 1,000 expectations. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Of course. Do you ever wish you weren't a queen?" She stared out at the city for a long moment, every day. The honesty in her voice surprised him. "Then why keep doing it?" "Because they need me," she said. "Because if I don't lead, this war never ends. And because—" her eyes flickered to his, "if I give up, I may never see the world I dream of." "What kind of world?" "One where humans and Cleari stand together, where no one fights over fear or blood, where you don't tremble on battlefields and I don't wear a crown heavy with guilt." Zane smiled softly. "That's a big dream." "Big dreams are the only ones worth having." They spoke for hours about their childhoods, their fears, their hopes for what came after the war, and slowly the distance between them closed. At one point, Zane told her about Earth, about sunsets over the oceans, about laughter in crowded cities, about how he missed the smell of rain. "It sounds beautiful," she said. "It is," he replied, "but it's not the same without someone to share it with." Elira looked at him, her violet eyes bright beneath the stars. "And who would you share it with?" He hesitated, heart pounding. "I think you already know." Her lips parted slightly, 1,000 unspoken words caught between them. But before either could say more, the palace doors burst open. "Your Majesty," Commander Lyran ran onto the balcony, his face pale. "We have a situation." The moment shattered. Elira stood at once, queen once more. "What is it?" "Intelligence reports a strike force heading for Tryon. A coordinated assault, far larger than anything we've seen. They mean to take the capital." Zane's chest tightened. "How long?" "Less than 48 hours. "Prepare the defenses," Elira ordered. "Evacuate the civilians, and get me every commander in the sector. We will not lose this world." Lyran saluted and hurried off. When he was gone, silence fell again, heavier now, colder. "It never ends, does it?" Zane said quietly. "No," she whispered, "it never does." They returned to the war room, where plans and strategies filled the night. But even amid the chaos, Zane's mind kept drifting back to the balcony, to the words left unsaid, to the weight of what he felt but hadn't dared to speak aloud. As dawn approached, the room emptied, leaving only the two of them. Elira stood by the window, watching the first light creep over the horizon. Zane joined her, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Are you afraid?" she asked suddenly. "Terrified," he admitted. "But I've been afraid since the day I landed here, and I'm still here." She turned to him, eyes shining with something deeper than gratitude. "You are more than I ever expected, Zane Holt. And you're everything I didn't know I needed," he said before he could stop himself. They stood in silence, the words hanging in the air like a heartbeat. "After this battle," Elira whispered, "if we survive, we must talk about what happens next." Zane smiled faintly. "I'd like that." "Then promise me something," she said. "Anything. Don't give up, no matter how dark it gets." He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I don't know how to give up anymore." The war wasn't over, the storm was coming. But as the first ships of the enemy fleet appeared in the distant sky, Zane felt no fear. Not really. Because for the first time, he wasn't fighting just for survival. He was fighting for her. For a future they both believed in. And that made all the difference. The hours before the battle felt longer than any war itself. The sky above Tryon was no longer a peaceful canvas of stars. It churned with distant flashes of enemy ships massing in orbit, streaks of red light flickering like a heartbeat in the heavens. The city below was tense and silent. Streets once filled with laughter were now empty, shields rising over buildings, soldiers marching to their posts. And in the heart of it all, Zane stood beside Elira, staring out at a sky that promised fire. "Funny," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I used to be scared of thunderstorms as a kid. Now I'm about to fight one." Elira glanced at him, her lips curling in a faint smile. "Are you scared now?" "Terrified," he admitted, "but I think I've learned how to live with it." "That," she said, "is courage." He chuckled. "No, that's stupidity dressed up as courage." She stepped closer, the faint glow of the defense screens casting silver across her face. "If you were truly foolish, you would have left long ago. Instead, you're here, standing beside a queen in a war that isn't yours." "It is mine," he said quietly, "because it's yours." For a moment she said nothing. Then, gently, she placed her hand over his. "Then we will stand together." The War Council assembled in the command chamber shortly after. Holographic maps flickered to life, showing the enemy fleet descending in waves. It was larger than they expected, triple the size of any previous assault. Elira's commanders spoke in hurried, grim tones. "They're targeting our shield generators first," Commander Lyran reported. "Once they fall, the capital is exposed." "We'll hold them," Elira said. "We must." "But Your Majesty," another officer argued, "our fleet is outnumbered. Our ground forces are exhausted. We cannot win a prolonged siege." Zane studied the map, his mind racing. "Then we don't fight a siege." The room turned toward him. Elira raised a brow. "What are you thinking?" "Hit them before they're ready," Zane said, stepping forward. "Their formation is still changing. If we strike the lead ships with everything we've got now, we might break their advance before they're fully in position." "It's risky," Lyran warned. "If we fail, they'll crush us." "And if we wait, they'll crush us anyway," Zane said. "At least this way we have a chance." Elira's gaze lingered on him, thoughtful, proud. "Prepare the strike fleet," she ordered. "We move at dawn." Dawn never came quietly on Tryon. The sky erupted with light as the combined human-Cleari fleet launched into orbit. Zane stood on the bridge of the flagship beside Elira, both strapped into command seats as the ship trembled under the force of launch. "Still terrified?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos. "More than ever," he said, "but I like having you next to me." She smiled faintly. "Then do not look away." They broke through the atmosphere into a sea of stars and straight into hell. Enemy cruisers loomed ahead, colossal silhouettes firing beams of energy that turned space into a storm of light. The deck shook violently as their shields flared under the first impacts. "Forward batteries online," shouted a tactical officer, locking on targets. "Fire," Elira commanded. The fleet answered with a roar. Lances of plasma and missiles streaked into the void, tearing into enemy ships. Explosions blossomed like stars going nova. It was beautiful and terrifying. Zane gripped the edge of the console as the ship jolted again. "So, do we celebrate every time we don't explode, or just at the end?" "Focus," Elira said, though she was laughing under her breath. Hours blurred into minutes. The battle raged, fierce and merciless. Ships shattered. Lives were lost. But Zane's plan worked. The enemy's formation fractured, their assault slowing under the unexpected counterattack. Yet victory was far from certain. A massive dreadnought broke through the chaos, larger and deadlier than any they had faced. Its cannons glowed with terrifying power, each shot capable of vaporizing a city block. "It's heading straight for the shield generators," Lyran warned. "If it breaches orbit, the capital is lost." "Can we stop it?" Zane asked. "Not with our fleet scattered," Elira replied. "We need to board it, disable it from the inside." Zane stared at her. "You mean again? Do you object?" "Of course I object," he said, "but I'm going anyway, are I?" She gave him that look, the one that was half challenge, half affection. "I would expect nothing less." They boarded a small strike craft with a team of elite soldiers and launched toward the dreadnought. Enemy fire streaked past them, close enough to make the hull groan. The ship shuddered as they latched onto a docking port. "Ready?" Illyra asked. "No," Zane replied, "but since when has that stopped me?" They breached the airlock and stormed inside. Blaster fire lit the corridors as they fought their way toward the main reactor. Zane ducked behind a console, heart pounding. "This feels familiar," he shouted over the gunfire. "You complain too much," Illyra replied, cutting down two guards with a sweep of her staff. "Complaining is how humans cope." They pushed forward step by step until they reached the reactor chamber. Alarms blared. More troops poured in. It was chaos, but together they held their ground. "Overload sequence primed," Zane said, typing furiously into the console. "We have 60 seconds to get out." "Then we must hurry," Illyra yelled, grabbing his hand. They ran, sprinting through the corridors as explosions rocked the ship. Fire and smoke chased them down the halls. Their shuttle detached seconds before the dreadnought erupted in a brilliant storm of light, scattering debris across the void. Cheers echoed through comms. The enemy's flagship was gone. Their assault crumbled. And for the first time, victory felt close enough to touch. Later, back on Tryon, Zane and Illyra stood beneath the stars once more, the same stars that had once felt so distant. "You did it again," she said softly. "You refused to give up." "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied, meeting her gaze. "Not when you're counting on me." She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I do more than count on you, Zane Holt." Their hands brushed, their hearts raced, and though the war was not yet over, something stronger had already been won, a bond forged in fire, laughter, and impossible odds. The night sky shimmered above them, not as a warning but as a promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The victory against the dreadnought should have felt like the end, the kind of triumph that led to celebration, speeches, and peace. But instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. The enemy had retreated, but they hadn't surrendered. Their fleets were regrouping in deep space. Spies whispered of a last, desperate plan, one that could wipe Tryon from existence if they failed to stop it. And as preparations for the final battle began, Zane found himself feeling restless. He should have been proud of what he had done. He had faced impossible odds and survived. He had turned fear into courage. He had become someone people looked up to, but none of that was what stayed with him. What stayed was her. The way Illyra had held his hand in the dark. The way her eyes lingered on him just a little too long when she thought he wasn't looking. The way his chest ached when she smiled. And how, despite everything, he still hadn't told her how he truly felt. Late one evening, Zane stood on the palace balcony again, staring at the stars. They were beautiful, cold, distant, eternal, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't looking up and wondering what was out there. He was wondering if his future was standing behind him. "I knew I'd find you here." Illyra's voice came softly from the doorway. Zane smiled without turning. "How did you guess?" "Because you always come here when you're thinking too much," she teased gently, walking to his side. "I've got a lot to think about," he admitted. "About the battle. About everything." She was quiet for a moment. Then, with that calm, steady voice he had come to love, she asked, "Are you afraid?" "Always," he said with a small laugh. "But it's not the battle that scares me this time." "Then what does?" He turned to face her, heart pounding harder than it ever had on any battlefield. "Losing you." Her breath caught. "Zane." I know," he said quickly. "You're a queen. You have duties. There's a war to win. But I had to say it, because if something happens to me tomorrow or to you, I don't want this to go unsaid." Her eyes softened. "What is it you wish to say?" "That I love you," he whispered. The silence that followed felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. Illyra stared at him, her lips parted, her expression unreadable. For a second he thought he'd made a mistake, that he'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Then she stepped closer and pressed her forehead gently to his. "And I love you," she whispered back. The world didn't change in that moment, the war didn't end, and the danger didn't vanish. But something inside both of them did. It was as if a weight they hadn't even realized they carried had been lifted. They spent the rest of the night walking the gardens, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, the pressure of being born to rule. He told her about Earth, about his dreams before the war. They laughed, teased, and shared silences that felt more intimate than any words. "I never thought I'd fall for someone like you," he said at one point. "Someone like me?" she asked, amused. "An alien queen with laser swords, and a tendency to drag me into suicidal missions." She laughed, a bright, beautiful sound. "And I never thought I'd fall for someone who trips over his own boots." "Hey," he protested, grinning, "I've gotten better." "Only slightly." They both laughed until they were breathless. And when the laughter faded, they stood under the stars, holding each other in a quiet, perfect stillness. The next morning shattered that peace. The alarms blared before dawn, a deep, resonant wail that shook the palace walls. Zane and Elira rushed to the command room, still half-dressed, their hearts pounding. "What's happening?" she demanded. Lyron's face was grim. "The Dominion fleet is moving, faster than expected. They'll be here in less than 12 hours. Are the defenses ready?" "Mostly, but there's more." He hesitated. "We intercepted a transmission. They're deploying a planet-killer weapon. If it reaches orbit, Tryon is lost." Elira's face hardened. "Then we strike first." Lyron shook his head. "We don't have the numbers to win a direct assault. We need a surgical strike. A small team. Infiltrate the weapon platform and destroy it from the inside." Zane felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. "Let me guess. That small team is us." Elira looked at him, and for once her regal composure faltered. "I cannot ask you to do this." "You're not asking," he said softly. "I'm already going." "Zane." "I meant what I said," he interrupted. "I'm not afraid of the battle. I'm afraid of losing you. And if there's even a chance I can stop that from happening, then I'm going." For a moment she looked at him as if searching for a reason to argue. Then she smiled, small, sad, but full of pride. "Then we go together." "Together," he echoed, taking her hand. That night, as they prepared for the mission that could save or doom the world, there were no more jokes, no more teasing, only soft words and lingering touches, stolen moments that felt precious and fleeting. "If we don't make it back," Zane began. "We will," Elira said firmly. "But if we don't," he continued, "I want you to know that loving you, even for a moment, was worth everything." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Then let us make sure we have more than a moment." As dawn broke, the two of them boarded the small strike craft that would take them into the heart of danger once again. The stars stretched ahead, bright and endless, a future uncertain, but one they would face hand in hand. Because this wasn't just a war anymore. This was love, fierce, fragile, and worth everything. And neither of them was willing to give up. The strike craft soared through the void like a silver arrow, its engines humming softly as it slipped past enemy patrols. Below them, Tryon shimmered like a blue jewel, fragile and beautiful, a world worth fighting for. Zane stared out the viewport, his heart thudding in rhythm with the soft pulse of the ship. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate the Dominion's planet killer, disable its core, and escape before it detonated. But they both knew there was nothing simple about it. One mistake, one miscalculation, and the entire planet and everyone they loved would vanish in a single flash of light. "Are you ready?" Elira asked quietly, standing beside him. "No," Zane admitted, "but I'm going anyway." She smiled softly. "I would not have expected anything else." They stood together in silence, watching the stars streak past. And then, gently, Elira slipped her hand into his. "If this is our last battle," she whispered, "then I am glad it is with you." "It won't be the last," he said, squeezing her hand. "We've still got too much to do. You have a galaxy to rule. I have a coffee machine back home that probably still doesn't work." She laughed, the sound bright and full of life. "Then we must survive, for the coffee." "For the coffee," he echoed with a grin. The enemy weapon platform loomed ahead, a colossal structure of black metal and crimson energy, pulsing with ominous light. Its reactor, once activated, would unleash destruction on a scale no world could withstand. The strike craft latched onto a maintenance port, and the team slipped inside. Darkness swallowed them as they moved through narrow corridors lit only by the glow of distant warning lights. 2 minutes until patrol rotation," Zane whispered, checking his wrist scanner. "Then we move quickly," Elira replied. They advanced deeper into the heart of the weapon, taking down guards silently and bypassing security fields with a mix of Cleari tech and Zane's human ingenuity. Every step brought them closer to the core, and to the point of no return. "Remind me why we keep doing this," Zane muttered as they crawled through a maintenance shaft. "Because no one else will," Elira said softly, "and because we cannot stand by and let darkness win." "Right," he sighed, "hero stuff." The core chamber was enormous, a cathedral of glowing energy suspended in a lattice of alien machinery. It pulsed with deadly power, and at its center, the activation matrix ticked down toward firing sequence. 20 minutes, Zane murmured. "That's all the time we have." "Can you disarm it?" Elira asked. "Maybe," he said, kneeling at the control panel, "but I'll need cover." "You shall have it." While Elira and the strike team held the entrances, Zane dove into the controls. Sparks flew as he bypassed circuits and rerouted power flows. His heart pounded as the seconds bled away. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Come on, come on." "Status," Elira called over the gunfire. Dominion troops had found them, and the chamber erupted into chaos. "Almost there," Zane shouted back. "Just need a few more." A blast tore through the platform, throwing him across the room. Pain shot through his side as he slammed into the floor. "Zane," Elira's voice was distant, frantic. She was beside him in an instant, cradling his face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he groaned. "Just gonna feel that tomorrow." She looked at the console, now sparking and ruined. "Can you still stop it?" Zane stared at the smoking machinery, his heart sinking. "Not from here. The override's gone." "Then what do we do?" He swallowed hard. There was only one option left. "I can still trigger a manual shutdown, but the control is inside the reactor. Once I start the process, there's no time to escape." Her eyes widened. "No, absolutely not." "It's the only way," he said. "If we don't do this, everyone dies." "I will do it," she said firmly. "You will go." "No," he said just as firm. "You're the queen. Your people need you, and he hesitated, then smiled softly. "I'm just a guy who fixes things. This is what I was meant to do." "Do not say that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Do not make this goodbye." "It's not," he said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It's a promise. I'll find my way back. I always do." For a long moment, she stared at him, torn between duty and love, between the queen she was and the woman she had become with him. Finally, she nodded. "Then I will be here," she whispered, her forehead resting against his, waiting. Zane stepped into the reactor chamber. Heat pressed against him like a living thing, and the hum of power roared in his ears. He moved quickly, hands flying over controls, heart racing faster with every second. The shutdown sequence began. The weapon screamed in protest, lights flickering wildly, alarms blared. And then silence. The platform shuddered as its core went dark. Power drained away, and the countdown halted with just 30 seconds left. "It's done," Zane breathed. "It's over." Zane, come back. Alira's voice crackled over the comm. The platform is collapsing. I'm on my way. He ran. The halls around him crumbled as explosions tore through the structure. Smoke and fire filled the air. He stumbled, coughed, pushed forward. He had to reach her. He had to. The docking hatch was just ahead, and there she was, waiting, her hand outstretched. Zane. He leapt. Her hand caught his. And together, they dove into the shuttle as the platform exploded behind them. A brilliant burst of light swallowed by the void. Hours later, the war was over. The weapon was destroyed. The Dominion fleet scattered. Tryon was safe. On the palace balcony, beneath a sky full of stars, Zane stood with Alira once more. The wind was cool. The world was quiet, and for the first time there was no fear. "You kept your promise," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "I told you," he said, smiling. "I don't give up." She laughed softly and then kissed him. It was gentle at first, then deeper, filled with every word they hadn't said, every feeling they had carried through fire and war. When they parted, she smiled up at him. "What now?" "Now," he said, looking at the stars, "now we build something worth fighting for." Together, they watched the dawn break over a world reborn, their world, their future. And somewhere in the endless sky above, a new story was waiting to be written.